They were already dividing the house, while she was still sitting in it. That was the moment Evelyn Carter realized her children no longer saw her as their mother, but as something to be managed, signed, and quietly moved aside. At 72, wrapped in a wool blanket and still recovering from a mild stroke, she sat in her favorite chair by the window, her body slower, but her mind sharper than ever. From the hallway, her eldest son, Michael Carter, spoke casually, as if discussing a property he had already inherited. 3 bedrooms upstairs. I'll take the master. Claire can use the guest room. We'll turn Mom's sewing room into storage. He didn't lower his voice, didn't hesitate, didn't even look at her. Evelyn's eyes drifted across the room. Family photos, old furniture, memories built over decades, and then back to the doorway where her daughter, Claire, stood nodding along, arms folded, as if this conversation made perfect sense. They weren't cruel in the way strangers are cruel. They were calm, practical, efficient. The kind of coldness that hides behind concern. "Mom, we just want to make things easier for you," Claire said later, placing a folder of papers in front of her. "You won't have to worry about anything anymore." Evelyn noticed the wording immediately. Not your home, not your choice, just something to sign. She didn't argue, didn't resist. She simply listened, because while they believed her silence meant weakness, they had no idea she was hearing everything. They spoke about her life as if she were no longer living it. That was what unsettled Evelyn Carter the most. Not the words themselves, but the way they were said. Calm, practical, efficient. As if everything had already been decided, and all that remained was her signature. "Mom, this is for your own good," Claire said gently, sitting beside her with a folder neatly placed on her lap. "You don't need to worry about bills, maintenance, any of that anymore. We'll take care of everything. Everything." The word lingered. Evelyn nodded slowly, her expression soft, almost agreeable. But inside something sharper was forming, because she noticed what they didn't say. Not once did they ask what she wanted. Not once did they pause long enough to hear her answer. They spoke around her, not to her, like she had already stepped out of her own life. From the hallway, Michael continued, flipping through a notepad, listing out renovations, timelines, changes. "The kitchen needs updating. Nick, we can knock down that wall, open up the space. It's outdated anyway." Outdated. Evelyn's eyes drifted toward the kitchen doorway, where the faint stain from a long-ago accident still marked the tile. Left behind on a day filled with laughter, a moment her children had forgotten, but one she remembered clearly. To them, it was just a room. To her, it was a life. She noticed how Peter, her youngest, avoided eye contact entirely, standing near the doorway as if distancing himself from the conversation, but not stopping it either. That was when she understood something deeper. They didn't see this as taking. They saw it as transitioning, as if she had already crossed into a phase where decisions were no longer hers to make. And her silence. They mistook it for agreement. But Evelyn had always been quiet, and always the one who listened more than she spoke. And now, that silence wasn't weakness. It was awareness. Because for the first time, she wasn't just hearing their words. She was hearing who they had become. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, Evelyn Carter remained awake. Not because of the stroke, not because of the weakness in her body, but because of something else, something far sharper. Clarity. For years, she had been the kind of woman who adjusted, who listened, who let others speak louder, Decide faster. Move ahead while she stayed steady in the background. It had never felt like losing control before. It had felt like peace. But now, sitting alone in the dim light of the living room, she began to see it differently. The small things came back first. The way her children had stopped asking and started informing. The way decisions had slowly shifted from, "What do you think, Mom?" to "This is what we should do." The way her voice had grown quieter in a house she had built. Not all at once, but over time. So gradually, she had barely noticed it happening. Until now. Her eyes moved slowly across the room. The photographs on the wall, the furniture she and her husband had chosen together, the details she had spent decades shaping with care. Every corner of this house held a memory. But tonight, those memories felt different, not gone, but threatened. Because for the first time she understood something that unsettled her more than anything her children had said. They weren't waiting for her to leave. They were preparing for it. And in doing so, they had already begun to remove her from her own life. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her hands resting quietly on the blanket in her lap, her breathing slow and steady. She didn't feel anger. Not yet. What she felt was recognition. A quiet, undeniable realization that something had shifted and that she had been the last one to see it. But not anymore. Because in that moment, something inside her changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. She was no longer just the woman listening in silence. She was the woman who finally understood what that silence meant. And for the first time, she began to wonder what would happen if she chose to break it. The next afternoon, as sunlight stretched across the floorboards and the house settled into a familiar quiet, Evelyn Carter felt something stir that she hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, not sadness, but memory. It came without warning, soft at first, then sharper, pulling her back to a moment she hadn't thought about in years. She saw her husband, Thomas Carter, standing in the hallway, tools scattered around him, focused on a section of the closet wall he had insisted on handling himself. She had laughed back then, asked him why he wouldn't just let the contractors do it, why he cared so much about something so small. He had paused, wiped his hands, and smiled in that quiet, knowing way he sometimes did. "If they ever stop seeing you as family," he said casually, "show them what this house really is." At the time, she thought he meant memories, love, the life they had built together. She never asked him to explain. She never imagined she would need to. But now, sitting in the same house while her children discussed dividing it as if it were already theirs, to those words returned with a weight she could no longer ignore. Show them what this house really is. Evelyn's eyes slowly shifted toward the hallway closet, the one he had worked on himself, the one he had never explained. Her heartbeat steadied, not from uncertainty, but from recognition. Because suddenly, that moment no longer felt distant. It felt intentional, placed, waiting. Her children believed this was the final stage, a matter of paperwork, signatures, and time. They believed everything important had already been decided. But Evelyn understood something they didn't. There was still a part of this house they had never seen, a part even she had forgotten. Until now. She didn't move right away, didn't rush, because this wasn't urgency, it was certainty. A quiet understanding that something had been left behind, not for decoration, not for memory, but for protection. And for the first time since the stroke, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in days. Not weak, not uncertain, but aware. Because whatever her husband had meant, she was finally ready to understand it. Evelyn didn't move right away. Standing in the hallway, her hand resting lightly against the closet door, Evelyn Carter allowed herself a moment of stillness. Not hesitation, but recognition. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't just about curiosity. This was something that had been waiting for her, for this exact moment. She reached up slowly, her fingers tracing along the top shelf where dust had settled over the years. For a second, there was nothing. Just wood. Just time. Then, she felt it. A small, nearly invisible latch hidden in the paneling. Her breath slowed. Her fingers pressed gently. A soft click echoed beneath her touch. Subtle, almost unnoticeable, but unmistakably deliberate. The wall shifted slightly, revealing a narrow seam where there had once been none. Evelyn's heart beat a little faster now, not from fear, but from understanding. This wasn't accidental. This had been built, carefully, intentionally. She pulled the panel open. Behind it, a concealed door appeared, perfectly blended with the wall, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. For decades it had been there, quietly waiting, untouched, unnoticed. Evelyn stepped inside. The air was cooler, still, preserved. The space was small, no larger than a walk-in closet, but it didn't feel like storage. It felt purposeful. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, and when she pulled the chain, a dim yellow light flickered on, revealing what lay inside. A metal filing cabinet, a wooden box, neatly stacked folders tied with twine. Everything arranged with precision, with care. Her chest tightened slightly, because this wasn't a collection of forgotten things. This was preparation. Her husband hadn't hidden memories here. He had hidden something important, something meant to be found. Evelyn closed the door behind her slowly, the outside world fading into silence. She sat down carefully on a small stool in the corner, her hands resting on her lap for just a moment, gathering herself, because whatever she was about to uncover would change everything. And for the first time since her children began deciding her future, she felt like she was the one about to decide what happened next. Evelyn opened the filing cabinet first. Her hands were steady now, more than they had been in days. Whatever uncertainty had followed her since the stroke, since her children began speaking about her life as if it no longer belonged to her, had quietly faded the moment she stepped into this hidden room. Inside the drawer, every document was carefully preserved, each one placed in a clear sleeve, labeled in Thomas Carter's precise handwriting. Organized, intentional, prepared. Evelyn Carter pulled out the first file, her eyes scanning the page slowly, and then she stopped. Her breath caught, not in panic, but in disbelief. It was the original property deed, not for the house, for the land, printed clearly at the top. Her name, alone. She blinked, reading it again, her fingers tightening slightly around the paper as if the words might change if she looked away. But they didn't. Evelyn Carter, sole owner. Her mind struggled to catch up. For decades, she had believed everything was shared, that the house, the land, the life they built together belonged equally to both her and her husband. They had talked about mortgages, repairs, renovations, but never this. Never the separation. Never the truth. She reached for another file, then another, land surveys, zoning rights, development permissions, every document connected to the ground beneath the house, not the structure itself, and every single one belonged to her. A realization began to form, slow, cold, undeniable. The house her children were so eager to divide was the least important part. The real value, the control, the power, was the land, and that land was hers. Evelyn leaned back slightly, her heart steady now, her thoughts clearer than they had been in weeks. Because suddenly, everything made sense. Her husband hadn't just built a home. He had built protection. Quiet, invisible, unquestioned. Waiting for a moment he must have known would come. Evelyn's eyes moved toward the wooden box resting on the shelf. She hadn't opened it yet, but she already understood something. This wasn't just about ownership. It was about intention. And whatever he had left for her, he had trusted she would find it, only when she truly needed to. Evelyn reached for the wooden box last. By then, her hands were no longer trembling, not from weakness, not from doubt. Whatever confusion had once clouded her thoughts had been replaced by something far steadier. Understanding. She opened the latch slowly, the faint creak echoing in the small room, as if marking the moment. Inside were letters, neatly tied together with a ribbon, each one addressed in Thomas Carter's familiar handwriting. Her name. Careful. Intentional. Evelyn paused for a second before untying the ribbon, her fingers brushing lightly against the paper as if she could feel his presence through it. She unfolded the first letter, her eyes moving across the page slowly, absorbing each word with a growing sense of clarity. He hadn't written about the past. He had written about the future, about change, about how people, especially family, could begin to see things differently over time. How a home could shift from being a place of belonging to something else entirely, something to inherit, something to divide. If you're reading this, he wrote, it means they've stopped seeing you as the heart of this house and started seeing you as an obstacle to it. Evelyn's breath slowed, not from shock, but from recognition, because he had seen this possibility long before she had, and he hadn't tried to stop it. He had prepared for it. She turned to the next letter, then another, each one building on the same idea, not warning her to fight, not telling her to confront anyone, but guiding her towards something quieter, stronger. Don't argue, he had written. Don't try to convince them. Let them believe what they want, until it matters. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, letting those words settle. Because for the first time, she understood why he had never explained any of this, why he had hidden it, why he had trusted her to find it only when she needed it most. This wasn't just protection. It was trust. And as she placed the letters back into the box, something inside her shifted completely. She wasn't the woman they thought she was anymore. Not fragile, not confused, not powerless. She was the one holding everything they believed was already theirs, and she didn't need to raise her voice to prove it. Because soon enough, they would see it for themselves. 3 days later, when the door opened again, everything looked exactly the same. Evelyn Carter sat in her armchair by the window, wrapped in the same wool blanket, her expression calm, almost fragile, the way her children had already decided she was. To them, nothing had changed, and that was exactly what she wanted. Michael walked in first, carrying a folder of transfer papers with the quiet confidence of someone who believed the outcome was already decided. Claire followed, her reassuring smile carefully in place, while Peter lingered near the doorway, avoiding eye contact, as if this were something he just wanted to be over. The lawyer set his briefcase on the table and spoke gently, professionally. This will only take a few minutes, Mrs. Carter. We just need your signature to finalize the property transfer. Evelyn nodded slowly, then spoke. Before we begin, there's something I'd like you all to see. They exchanged brief glances, mild impatience, faint confusion, but humored her. To them, this was just a delay, a moment, nothing more. Evelyn rose carefully, her steps steady despite the weakness they still assumed controlled her. She walked to the hallway closet, her hand reaching behind the top shelf, pressing the hidden latch with quiet certainty. A soft click. The panel shifted, and for the first time, her children froze. They had lived in this house their entire lives, and never knew this existed. Evelyn stepped inside and returned moments later, carrying a small wooden box and a stack of folders. She placed them gently on the table in front of the lawyer. "I think these belong in today's conversation," she said calmly. The room changed instantly. The lawyer opened the first document, his eyes moving quickly, then slowing. His posture straightened, his tone shifted. "This is the original land deed," he said carefully. Michael frowned. "That's not possible. The house is ours." "The house, perhaps," the lawyer interrupted quietly. "But the land it sits on belongs solely to Mrs. Carter." Silence fell, heavy, unavoidable. Evelyn looked at her children, not with anger, not with accusation, but with clarity. "Now," she said softly, I decide." And for the first time, they understood exactly who had been in control all along. The silence didn't break right away. It settled, heavy, uncomfortable. And for the first time, Evelyn Carter's children sat in a room where they were no longer the ones in control. Their confidence, the certainty they had carried into the house, began to unravel slowly. Michael's grip tightened around the edge of the table. His voice caught somewhere between disbelief and resistance. Claire's practiced calm disappeared, replaced by something far less steady. Even Peter, who had stayed quiet until now, finally looked up, really looked at his mother, for the first time in days. "Mom, did you know about this?" he asked carefully. Evelyn met his gaze without hesitation. "I do now." The lawyer continued turning pages, each document adding weight to what was already undeniable. Land rights, zoning authority, development permissions. Every piece pointed to the same conclusion. Nothing could move forward without her. Nothing could be transferred without her approval. The house they had already begun dividing didn't belong to them, not in the way they believed. Evelyn reached forward, sliding the wooden box across the table. Inside were the letters, the bank statements, the plans her husband had left behind, proof not only of ownership, but of intention. "Your father prepared for this," she said quietly. Michael shook his head slightly, still trying to hold on to something. "Why didn't he tell us?" Evelyn's answer came without hesitation. "Because he didn't build it for you." The words settled deeper than anything else had. Claire's voice trembled. "Titi, we were just trying to help you." Evelyn nodded gently. "I know," she said. "That's what made it so easy." She let the silence stretch just long enough for them to feel it, the same quiet helplessness she had felt days earlier. Then she spoke again. "You talked about this house like I was already gone," she said softly. "You divided rooms before I signed anything. You turned my life into a plan. Without me." No one interrupted her. No one could. Evelyn leaned back slightly, her expression calm, her voice steady. "This was never just a house," she continued. "It was protection. And now, it was hers to use. Because in that moment, the roles had reversed completely. They had come to take control of her life, but instead, they were the ones waiting for her decision. The decision didn't take long, not because it was easy, but because Evelyn Carter had already spent years learning how to live for others. And now, for the first time, she understood what it meant to choose for herself. "I've already spoken to a realtor," she said quietly. The words landed harder than anything else she had said that day. All three of her children looked up at once. "You're selling?" Claire's voice wavered, the certainty gone, replaced by something closer to panic. "This is our family home." Evelyn tilted her head slightly, her expression calm, almost gentle. "It was," she said. The room fell silent again, because this time there was nothing left to argue, no assumption left to hold on to. Within weeks, the process moved forward, quickly, efficiently, but entirely on her terms. The property was sold to a developer who saw what her children never had, and not the house, the land, the real value beneath it. Evelyn didn't attend every meeting, didn't involve herself in every detail. She didn't need to. Because for the first time, the outcome didn't depend on convincing anyone. It depended on her decision alone. The house they had grown up in, the one they had already begun to divide, was gone in less than 2 days, reduced to splinters, dust, and memory. And as Evelyn sat quietly in her car, watching it disappear piece by piece, she didn't feel loss. She felt something else. Closure. Not of a home, but of a version of her life that no longer belonged to her. She moved into a small lakeside cottage soon after. Chosen by her, arranged by her, paid for comfortably from the sale. For the first time in years, every decision inside those walls was hers alone. Where the furniture went, what stayed, what didn't. No one suggested, no one assumed, no one decided for her. And in that quiet, deliberate space, Evelyn understood something she had never fully felt before. Freedom didn't come from holding on to what others expected. It came from letting go and choosing what truly belonged to you. She didn't lose her home. She left it on her terms. In the quiet of her new lakeside cottage, Evelyn Carter no longer felt like someone who had been pushed aside. The walls were smaller, the space simpler, but everything inside it belonged to her decisions, her choices, her voice. For the first time in years, she arranged her life without interruption. No one telling her what was better. No one planning around her. No one waiting for her to step aside. The past didn't disappear, but it no longer controlled her. Because what she had gained was something far more valuable than the house she left behind. Control, not over others, but over her own life. And that changed everything. Sometimes the people closest to you don't take your power away. You slowly give it to them, by staying silent, by choosing peace over your own voice, by believing it's easier to let others decide, until one day, you realize your life no longer feels like yours. The truth is, you don't lose control in one moment. You lose it in small, quiet ones, and you take it back the same way. By choosing to speak, by choosing to decide, by choosing yourself. If this story touched you, comment below. Have you ever felt like people were making decisions about your life without you? And don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the next story might be the one that gives you the courage to take your power back.